Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Elite Iconic English. Today, we'll dive into a fascinating topic, a moment I'll never forget, sharing a story from my past. This episode is designed to help you improve your listening and writing skills by engaging with a real-life story. As you listen, pay attention to the way I structure my thoughts, use descriptive language, and build emotions into the narrative. You can then try writing your own version of a story that means a lot to you. Are you ready? Let's begin. Before we dive in, let me ask you a few questions. Have you ever experienced a moment that changed your perspective on life? What's a memory that brings a smile to your face or makes your heart race when you think about it? How would you describe it in detail to someone who wasn't there? Today, I'll share a story about a moment that had a profound impact on me. As you listen, think about your own special memories and how you might describe them. Let's go back to a warm summer evening 5 years ago. I was sitting at a small cafe in Paris, just a stone's throw away from the Eiffel Tower. The air smelled like freshly baked croissants, and the faint sound of a street performer playing the violin filled the background. I had just finished a long day of exploring the city, and this was my moment to relax and take it all in. Suddenly, a little boy, no older than 7, walked up to my table. He was holding a small notebook and a pen. "Bonjour," he said with a shy smile. His parents stood a few steps behind, encouraging him with gentle nods. It turned out he was learning English and wanted to practice by asking tourists a few questions. His bravery and curiosity struck me. He asked, "What is your favorite part of Paris so far?" And I remember answering, "The people, just like you, who make this city feel so warm and welcoming." His face lit up and he gave me a heartfelt merci before running back. To his parents, that small moment stayed with me. It reminded me of how simple gestures can bridge gaps between people from different worlds. It also made me think about the courage it takes to step out of your comfort zone, especially when learning a new language. Now, as I share this story, think about how you might describe a similar moment in your life. How would you set the scene? What details would you include to bring it to life for your listener? Let's continue exploring the layers of storytelling and the magic of unforgettable moments. Let's take a deeper look at the memory I just shared, and I'll show you how I carefully built the story. As you listen, try to notice the descriptive words and phrases I used. This is an important skill for both listening and writing, as it will help you sound more fluent and natural in your own storytelling. Now, let me continue. After the little boy ran back to his parents, I sat there for a few moments, reflecting on how such a simple interaction could feel so meaningful. The sun was setting behind the Eiffel Tower, casting a golden glow over everything. It felt like the city was wrapped in a gentle embrace. I could hear the soft murmur of conversations around me, the laughter of children playing nearby, and the rhythmic sound of footsteps on the cobblestone streets. It was the kind of moment that felt timeless, almost as if it had been carefully planned by the universe to remind me of the beauty in everyday encounters. What made this moment unforgettable wasn't just the boy's question. It was the warmth and connection I felt with him. Even though we didn't share the same language or culture, that's the power of human interaction. It's not always about the words we use, but how we make others feel. When I think back to that day, I realize that what stood out the most was the kindness in his eyes, and the way he was eager to learn, to connect, and to make the most out of his small conversation in English. So, let's pause for a moment. How about you? Can you think of a time when a simple encounter had a big impact on you? Maybe you were traveling, or you had an unexpected conversation with someone that made you see the world a little differently. The beauty of storytelling is that it allows us to take something ordinary and transform it into something meaningful by sharing it with others. In my case, I remember feeling so grateful for the experience. It wasn't just about having a nice conversation in a cafe in Paris. It was about how it reminded me of the universal connection we all share as humans. We all have moments that shape who we are, whether big or small, and those stories are what connect us with others. I encourage you to reflect on your own memories, especially the ones that brought you joy or taught you something important, and think about how you would tell them to someone else. As I sat there on that evening, the soft breeze carrying the scent of the nearby flowers, I thought about how much storytelling can teach us. Every story has the potential to inspire, to teach, or even to heal. The art of storytelling is not just in the words we choose, but in the emotions we convey and the experiences we share. Think about how you can tell your own stories in a way that makes them come alive for others. What if you could share your favorite memory in a way that someone could almost feel like they were right there with you? What details would you highlight? What emotions would you express? These are the questions I want you to consider as you practice your English listening and writing skills. It's also important to note that every detail in the story plays a role. From the description of the cafe to the boy's shy smile, each piece of information adds richness to the story and makes it more engaging for the listener. This is something you can apply when practicing your own English. When you write or when you speak, make sure to paint a vivid picture with your words. Describe not only what happened, but also how it felt, what you saw, and what you learned from the experience. This makes your storytelling more engaging and helps others understand your point of view. Now imagine if I told you the same story without the details. I was in Paris. A boy asked me a question, and it was a nice experience. It wouldn't have the same emotional impact, right? The details, the sounds, the sights, the feelings all add to the story and make it memorable. As you continue improving your English, think about how you can weave these details into your own stories. They'll help you sound more natural and help your listener connect with you on a deeper level. Have you ever had a moment where you didn't expect much, but it ended up meaning so much to you? Maybe you had a short conversation with someone, or you saw something that left a lasting impression. Those moments are the ones that stick with us because they're tied to emotions, and emotions are what make stories unforgettable. So let's think about how you could apply these storytelling tips to your own life. Maybe you could write a short story about a moment that had a big impact on you, just like I did. It doesn't have to be a grand event. Sometimes the most powerful moments are the small ones. Perhaps there was a time when a stranger helped you, or when you experienced something beautiful or unexpected in your day-to-day life. These moments are rich with detail and emotions, and they can be the basis for great storytelling. As you practice your English listening skills, remember that the more you listen to real-life stories like this, the better you will understand how to tell your own. Whether you're speaking or writing, you can start by thinking about the emotions you want to convey and the details that will bring your story to life. This is what makes your storytelling stand out, and what makes it meaningful for your listener or reader. Every time you share a story, you're not just practicing English, you're also learning how to connect with others on a deeper level. And this ultimately is what makes storytelling such a powerful tool for communication. You can use it to make your English sound more natural, to express your thoughts clearly, and to engage with others in meaningful ways. Let's keep practicing and thinking about the moments in our lives that are unforgettable. They might just be the key to improving your English in ways you never expected. Now that we've taken a deep dive into that unforgettable moment, let's explore how we can break down a personal story even further. Think about the kinds of stories you would love to share with someone else. The goal isn't just to tell a story, but to make it come to life for the listener. A good story doesn't just inform, it connects, evokes feelings, and creates a shared experience. Let's use a different example now, something that might be relatable to many of you. Imagine a time when you faced a challenge, something that made you feel nervous or unsure, but in the end you overcame it. What did you learn from that experience? How would you tell that story in a way that's compelling for someone else to listen to? For me, I can think of a time when I had to give a presentation in front of a large group of people. At first, I felt terrified. My palms were sweaty and my heart was racing. I had prepared for weeks, but there was still that fear of messing up in front of everyone. But as soon as I started talking, something changed. The nerves started to fade away and I felt more confident. The crowd was kind and their reactions gave me the energy I needed to keep going. In the end, it turned out to be one of the best presentations I've ever given. Now let's break this story down and see what we can learn from it. First, notice how I described the initial feelings of fear. I mentioned sweaty palms and racing heart. Those are physical symptoms that most people can relate to when they feel nervous. Describing physical sensations like this is an excellent way to make your story more vivid and relatable. It's not just about saying, "I was nervous." It's about showing how nervous you were so your listener can feel what you felt. Next, I described how the fear began to fade once I started speaking. That moment when the nerves disappear is often an important part of the story. It shows growth, change, or the turning point in the experience. In storytelling, highlighting a shift in the emotions or situation can keep your listener engaged and make the story more dynamic. Then I mentioned the reactions of the crowd, how their kindness gave me the energy I needed to continue. This part of the story reveals the importance of support from others. It reminds us that we don't have to face challenges alone, and the people around us can often make a big difference in how we handle difficult situations. Again, this adds depth to the story as it brings in the external elements that influence our emotions. So, think about your own life experiences. Can you recall a time when you felt nervous, unsure, or scared, but later found the strength to push through? How did others around you play a role in that? Maybe it was a teacher who believed in you, a friend who encouraged you, or a family member who gave you confidence. In storytelling, these external influences can add layers of meaning and help the listener understand the full scope of the experience. Now, let's consider a completely different type of story. What about a moment when something unexpectedly good happened? Maybe you weren't expecting to have a good day, but everything seemed to align in your favor. Let's say it was a simple day at the park, and you unexpectedly met an old friend. You hadn't seen each other in years, but the conversation flowed easily, and you caught up on everything that had happened in your lives. When telling this story, you'd want to include the surprise element. The fact that you didn't plan for this encounter makes it all the more meaningful. Perhaps you could describe the setting of the park. Was it a bright, sunny day, or was it a cool, breezy afternoon? How did it feel to see that old friend after so long? Did you both pick how bright were you left off, or was there an awkward moment before you got comfortable again? In this type of story, the surprise is key. The element of unexpected joy can make your listener feel excited too. It's not just about the encounter, it's about how the surprise made you feel in the moment. Describing the emotions that came with the surprise is what brings the story to life. By focusing on those emotions, you allow your listener to connect with your experience in a deeper way. As we continue, I want to remind you that every story, whether big or small, has the potential to teach us something. Through stories, we can learn about ourselves, our emotions, and how we interact with the world around us. That's why storytelling is such an effective tool for learning a language, especially when it comes to improving listening and writing skills. Stories allow us to practice using different tenses, emotions, and descriptive language. And the more we practice, the more natural our speaking and writing will become. Take a moment to think about your own stories. What do they reveal about you? How do they connect with your emotions and experiences? The goal here is to practice telling your stories in a way that is engaging for others, while also improving your own English skills. As you practice, try to incorporate the elements I've shared, describing physical sensations, the emotions, and the impact of others on your experience. These details will make your stories richer and more interesting. And remember, the more you listen to stories, the more you'll understand how to create your own. Pay attention to how others tell their stories. What details do they include? How do they express their emotions? This will help you learn how to structure your own stories and how to make them come alive for your listener. Whether you're writing, speaking, or even thinking in English, storytelling is a skill that will always serve you well. Now think about a moment that was life-changing for you. Maybe it was a decision that shaped your path, or maybe it was a small, unexpected event that ended up making a big impact. For example, let's say you made a decision to study abroad. At first, it seemed like a small step, but over time, it changed your perspective on life. You could describe the uncertainty you felt when you first arrived in a new country, not knowing anyone and feeling nervous about fitting in. But then, you met someone who became a close friend, and suddenly, everything started to feel more familiar. As you spent more time there, you grew more confident, learned new things, and realized how much that experience had shaped who you are today. This type of story shows growth, change, and personal development. It teaches us about overcoming challenges, adapting to new situations, and finding strength within ourselves. As you tell your story, think about how you felt at different points in the journey. What did you learn from those challenges? What kind of person did you become as a result of the experience? In addition to personal stories, you can also share stories that involve others. Perhaps you remember a time when a family member or friend made a difference in your life. Maybe your grandmother shared wisdom with you that helped you during a difficult time, or maybe a teacher inspired you to pursue your dreams. These stories are powerful because they show how we're all interconnected. By telling stories about others, we're not only sharing our own experiences, but we're also honoring the people who have influenced our lives. The more you practice telling stories like this, the more confident you'll become in expressing yourself in English. Whether you're writing an essay, having a conversation, or giving a presentation, the skills you develop through storytelling will help you communicate more clearly and effectively. So, think about the stories you want to tell and start practicing. The more you tell them, the better you'll get at connecting with your audience and making your ideas come to life. As you continue improving your listening and speaking skills, always remember that every story you share is an opportunity to practice. Whether it's a small story about a casual experience or a big life-changing moment, it's your chance to explore the language and express yourself more freely. And with each story, you'll build your vocabulary, improve your grammar, and become more comfortable speaking and listening in English. The more you immerse yourself in storytelling, the better you'll become at using different aspects of language. Storytelling is not just about telling a sequence of events, but about connecting with your audience. To make your story even more engaging, let's think about adding some unique details. Details help bring a story to life, and they allow the listener to visualize and connect with your experience. For example, let's say you're telling a story about a road trip. You could mention the places you stopped at, the people you met, and the conversations you had along the way. You could say, "We stopped at a small diner just outside of town. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air, and the waitress, an older woman with glasses, gave us a warm smile as we sat down." Now, your listener isn't just hearing about a road trip. They're imagining themselves in that diner with you, breathing in the air, seeing the smiling waitress, and feeling the warmth of the moment. That's what makes a story powerful. These little details allow you to practice using descriptive language and adjectives. For example, instead of just saying, "It was a nice day," you could say, "The sun was shining brightly, and the sky was a clear blue with only a few fluffy clouds, drifting lazily by." By describing the environment, you're creating a more complete picture in the listener's mind. They can almost feel the warmth of the sun and see the colors of the sky. This level of detail helps you improve both your speaking and listening skills. You're practicing using more advanced vocabulary, and you're also listening to how those words can be used to describe different situations. As you become more comfortable with storytelling, you'll also start to think about how the story unfolds. A good story often has a clear beginning, middle, and end. This structure helps your audience follow the narrative. In the beginning, you introduce the characters, the setting, and the situation. Then, in the middle, you build the story by describing the challenges or conflicts that arise. Finally, in the end, you provide a resolution or conclusion. By following this pattern, you're giving your audience a clear roadmap to understand the story and its message. For example, if you're telling a story about overcoming a personal challenge, you could start by explaining the difficulty you faced. Then, you can describe the steps you took to overcome it. And in the end, you can talk about what you learned from the experience. This structure is useful because it helps you organize your thoughts and speak more clearly. It's especially important in English because it can be easy to get lost in the details and forget the main point. Practicing storytelling with this structure will make it easier for you to communicate your ideas in a logical and organized way. Another important thing to think about when telling a story is the pacing. Pacing is how quickly or slowly you tell the story. Sometimes it's good to slow down and focus on the details. Other times, you might want to speed up to create excitement or tension. For example, imagine you're telling a story about a surprise party. When you describe the preparations, you could slow down and focus on the excitement of getting everything ready. You could say, "We spent hours decorating the house, making sure everything was perfect. We hung colorful balloons and set up the warm cake on the table waiting for the big moment." But when the surprise happens, you might want to speed up the pacing. You could say, "Then the door opened and everyone jumped out shouting, 'Surprise!' Her face lit up with joy and we all laughed together." Changing the pacing helps add energy to your story, and it also gives your listener a chance to feel the emotion you experienced in that moment. Pacing is important because it helps keep your audience interested. If you tell a story too slowly, without any changes in pace, it might lose the listener's attention. But if you change the rhythm, you create a dynamic story that keeps them engaged. This is another technique that will improve your speaking skills because you'll learn how to control your voice and tone to match the mood of your story. Now, let's talk about the role of reflection in storytelling. Sometimes the best stories are those where the storyteller reflects on what they've learned or how they've changed as a result of the experience. After all, a story is not just about what happened. It's about how the experience shaped you and what you took away from it. For example, you might tell a story about a time you faced a difficult decision, but rather than just recounting the events, you could reflect on what you learned from the experience. At the time, I wasn't sure if I made the right choice, but looking back now, I see that it taught me to trust my instincts more. This kind of reflection adds depth to your story and gives the listener something to think about. It shows that you've learned from your experiences and that you're able to grow from them. This is an excellent way to practice critical thinking in English, as it forces you to organize your thoughts and articulate what you've learned in a meaningful way. When you reflect on an experience, you also practice using complex sentence structures. You might need to use phrases like looking back or in hindsight to explain how your perspective has changed over time. This helps you use more advanced language and improves your ability to speak fluently and clearly. One final tip for telling a compelling story is to think about your audience. Who are you telling this story to? Are they friends, family, or maybe a group of strangers? The way you tell the story might change depending on who's listening. For example, if you're telling a story to a close friend, you might use casual language and inside jokes. But if you're telling the same story to a group of people you don't know as well, you might choose more neutral language and avoid too many personal details. Adapting your story to your audience is a key part of communication. It helps you make sure your message is received in the way you want it to be. Being aware of your audience also helps you practice using different tones and levels of formality. You'll learn how to adjust your language to suit different situations. This is an important skill for both speaking and writing, especially when you're engaging in real-life conversations, presentations, or even writing emails. So to recap, storytelling is a fantastic way to improve your English. Whether you're focusing on details, emotions, dialogue, or pacing, you're practicing key language skills that will help you communicate more effectively. By telling stories in an engaging and organized way, you'll improve your listening, speaking, and writing abilities. Each time you tell a story, you're learning something new about the language and about yourself. Whether the story is big or small, personal or shared, it's an opportunity to practice and improve. Keep telling stories, and with time, you'll become more confident and fluent in English. As you continue to practice storytelling, you will also find that it's an excellent opportunity to enhance your listening skills. As you listen to others tell stories, whether in English or your native language, you can notice how they structure their narratives, use emotions, and create imagery. By observing how others tell their stories, you can incorporate these techniques into your own speaking. The more you listen to others, the better you'll become at recognizing different story styles and adjusting your own storytelling approach accordingly. For example, if you're listening to a podcast where the host shares a story about a trip abroad, pay attention to the way they describe the sights, sounds, and experiences. How do they bring the place to life? Are they using a lot of adjectives to describe their surroundings, like bustling streets or vibrant markets? What kind of emotions do they express while telling their story? Are they happy, excited, or even surprised? Try to incorporate these techniques into your own storytelling practice. You can even practice telling a similar story, but using your own unique details. The more you practice listening to different stories and applying what you hear, the better. Your skills will become a key element of effective storytelling is being able to engage your audience and keep them interested. One way to do this is by asking questions or involving your listeners. If you're telling a story to a group, you might ask questions like, "Can you imagine what it would be like to be in my shoes?" Or "Have you ever experienced something similar?" These types of questions get your audience to reflect on the story and connect with your experience. It's not just about sharing your story, it's about inviting your listeners to step into it with you. This can make your storytelling more dynamic and relatable. Another great way to engage your audience is by using humor. Sometimes a well-timed joke, or funny observation can break the tension in a story and make your audience laugh. Humor is a wonderful tool for making your story more enjoyable and memorable. For example, let's say you're telling a story about a time when you accidentally got lost in a new city. You could add a humorous twist by saying something like, "I thought I was a world-class navigator, but after 10 minutes of walking in circles, I realized I was in the middle of a maze with no way out. It was like a bad episode of a reality TV show." By adding humor, you not only make your story more entertaining, but you also help your listeners relax and enjoy the moment with you. Humor is also a great way to practice tone and voice. When you use humor, you're naturally adjusting your tone to make it more playful and lighthearted. This gives you a chance to experiment with your voice and the way you deliver different parts of the story. It's an effective way to practice speaking more fluently and expressively, which will help you improve your overall communication skills in English. You may also want to think about the perspective from which you're telling the story. In storytelling, perspective is key. You can tell a story from the first-person perspective. "I did this. I saw that." Or from the third-person perspective, "He did this. They saw that." The perspective you choose can change the way the story feels. When you tell a story from your own point of view, it can feel more personal and intimate. On the other hand, telling a story from a third-person perspective can give you the opportunity to include more details and create a sense of distance between the audience and the characters involved. For example, if you're sharing a memory of a family gathering, you could tell the story from your perspective, saying, "I remember my aunt's face lighting up when she saw the gift I brought her. It was such a special moment." Or you could choose to tell it from a third-person perspective. "At the family gathering, everyone was surprised when she opened the gift. Her face lit up with joy." Both versions are effective, but the choice of perspective adds a unique flavor to the story and affects how the audience connects with the experience. As you gain more experience with storytelling, you'll start to experiment with different narrative techniques. One technique that's often used in both storytelling and writing is the use of flashbacks. A flashback allows you to jump back in time to a significant moment that adds depth or meaning to your story. This is a powerful tool for creating suspense, intrigue, or emotional impact. For example, imagine you're telling a story about a challenging situation at work. You could start by describing how difficult the present situation is, and then use a flashback to show a moment from the past that explains how you ended up in this situation. "I thought the meeting was going well until I remembered what happened last year. It was then that I realized I had made the same mistake before, and I knew I had to do something differently this time." Flashbacks allow you to add layers to your story and give your audience a better understanding of the context. By using this technique, you can also practice your storytelling skills by shifting between different points in time. It helps you become more adept at handling complex narratives and keeps your audience engaged as they anticipate what will happen next. Another technique to keep in mind is the use of foreshadowing. This is when you hint at something that will happen later in the story. It creates anticipation and draws your listeners in. For example, let's say you're telling a story about a surprise party. You might say something like, "I knew something was off when my friend kept telling me how much she loved the color purple. It was a small detail, but I had a feeling it meant something." This video is about to end. See you in the next video.